What's up guys, my name is Julian, your solar expert, and today we're going to be comparing the two top batteries for residential use cases, the Franklin Whole Home aPower2, which is a brand new battery that just came out within the last couple months, versus the Tesla Powerwall 3, which is the most popular battery sold today in the United States. So I'm going to be breaking down all of the most important specs that you need to consider when comparing these two batteries, because most people right now are just going with the Powerwall 3 because the price point is the least. That definitely is true. The Franklin does cost a little bit more money, but the Franklin beats the Tesla Powerwall 3 in a lot of different areas. And so I'm going to be going over where exactly the Franklin beats the Tesla. And so you can basically decide whether it's worth it for you to spend a little bit more money. Now, before I dive in, there is something important to say, which is that the Tesla Powerwall 3 in a lot of markets, I'm going to put the map up right now. If you're in any of these utilities, the Powerwall 3 uses what's called the meter collar or the backup switch, which really is how the price point for the Tesla comes down a lot lower than the Franklin. If you are not in one of these markets where this meter collar or backup switch has been approved, the price point for these two are actually very similar. And so if you are having to install with either the gateway or the A gate with a critical loads backup panel, which is essentially a sub panel with all the backed up loads moved over and relocated, now you're looking at, like I said, almost the same price. And I think the Franklin is the obvious choice for at least most people. So with that being said, let's dive into these specs and get down to the meat and potatoes of really what is important and where this Franklin beats the Tesla. And of course, if you would like help going solar, please do not hesitate to reach out. My cell phone number is 760-473-5878. I have a whole team of consultants around the country that I've handpicked. They're very knowledgeable and educational, just like me, and we would love to help you go solar. So please don't hesitate to reach out. All of my information is in the description below. All right, so comparing Franklin aPower2 to the Tesla Powerwall 3. So with capacity, Franklin has a little thing where they always want to be just a little bit better than Tesla, right? So they have a 15 kilowatt hour capacity. Think of capacity as like gallons of fuel that you can store, okay? So essentially, the Franklin holds 1.5 kilowatt hours more, but if you need more than this, you can always stack multiple batteries together. So if the price were the same, of course, you'd obviously want more capacity. Now, continuous power, this is like horsepower or how fast the capacity, the kilowatt hours, could be discharged, basically at what rate. So just quickly to sum this up so you understand, if the Franklin, for example, were discharging at 10 kilowatts, it would take exactly 1.5 hours to drain the full 15 kilowatt hours. So just some simple math so you understand. Over here, similar deal, it would take just over an hour at 11.5 kilowatts of discharge speed to drain 13.5 kilowatt hours. It would do exactly 11.5 kilowatt hours in 1 hour. Okay, so the continuous power, as you can see, is slightly higher on the Tesla Powerwall 3, which obviously that's a win to the Tesla. Same thing with the surge power being 185 LRA. That stands for locked rotor amperage. This is essentially how much power it requires usually to start something like an HVAC machine. With both of these systems, you should be able to start either a 4 or maybe a 5-ton HVAC system. So you should be okay with one battery in both of these scenarios most of the time, but with one battery running, HVAC or something, that one battery may not last very long. So that's a scenario when you more want maybe 2 batteries. But one thing to consider when looking at this 10 kilowatt versus 11.5 kilowatt continuous power output is that Franklin is an AC coupled battery. So what I mean by that is the power from the inverter in the battery, which is 10 kilowatts, that can be combined with the solar's inverters. So for example, if you're using like N-phase microinverters, all of the kilowatts from the solar and the battery can be combined. And so in the daytime, you could actually have far more than 10 kilowatts of continuous if you needed it. Versus the Powerwall 3, which is a DC coupled architecture that uses a hybrid inverter. So the inverter inside the Powerwall 3 is just one inverter that the solar and the battery shares. And so it's worked a little bit harder and you have a single point of failure, but the benefit is that you can save a little bit of money because ultimately you're only having to purchase one inverter for your entire system versus like the Franklin, where if you have 20 panels, you're going to have 20 N-phase microinverters, along with, of course, the inverter that's built into the Franklin battery itself. So that's another reason why this Franklin ultimately is usually going to cost a little bit more. All right, getting into charge speed. Now, this is something that even Tesla and the rep that we work with kind of played dumb over for a long time, because I don't think that they really wanted us to really know. But something that Tesla and most people aren't going to tell you is the actual charging speed. So everyone talks about how, oh, with the Powerwall 3, you can discharge at 11.5 kilowatts. Amazing. But when you're charging up the battery, when it's going the other way, when the power is going into the battery, it can only essentially absorb 5 kilowatt hours for every hour at this rate of charging, only 5 kilowatt hours. And so this is where the Franklin actually can really benefit you if you're trying to just get away with one battery and you want to effectively make sure that that one battery, is going to charge. Like, for example, let's say you have a solar system that's a 10 kilowatt system, and let's say it's sunny outside, it's the middle of the day, and that solar system is producing about 8 kilowatts in AC power. Now, if you're not home and the house is essentially empty and you're not really using any power, well, the 3 kilowatts of that 8 kilowatts with the Powerwall 3 would be wasted because the battery just can't keep up with charging, actually absorbing all that power fast enough. Whereas with the Franklin, you'd actually be able to get all of the power more easily and less would actually be wasted. So this is another place where I think this is an underrated stat. So this is something to pay attention to. It may not be super important for everyone, and as you get more batteries, it may not matter quite as much, but especially for those trying to get away with one battery and making sure it charges effectively, I think that the Franklin's going to be actually much better in the real world for a lot of people when they really see how it's working in reality. Let's get into warranty, because this is another place where the Franklin really outshines the Tesla. So just like cars, how they'll say you have a 5-year warranty or 60,000 miles or something like that, whichever one comes first. The battery warranties are the same. On the surface, you'll hear that the Franklin has a 15-year warranty and the Tesla has a 10-year warranty, but really there's also a throughput, a megawatt throughput. So it's 15 years on the Franklin or 60 megawatt hours of throughput, whichever one comes first. And with the Tesla, it's 10 years and then just shy of 38 megawatt hours. And so that's even more of a difference when you talk about the actual energy that can flow through that battery before, either Franklin or Tesla says, no, we're not covering anything. So this is a big deal. Now, you may see that Tesla says that you have unlimited cycles on their warranty, but this comes with a lot of clauses, and essentially even if you ever charge an EV or they say that your system charges and discharges too much more than normal, then they don't give you that unlimited cycle warranty. So really, I think that 95+% of people will disqualify themselves from that unlimited cycle, and most people are going to be in that sub 38 megawatt hour throughput warranty category. That's a big one, especially when looking at the price difference. If the Franklin is a few grand more, think about how much more life you're really getting for your money. All right, load management is a really, really big one, because with this meter collar that we use, it's kind of it's great and it's also not great at the same time for different reasons. So with this meter collar that the Powerwall 3 utilizes, you can just back up your entire main service panel really easily now by just installing this backup switch, which is fantastic because for a few years now, it's been a pretty frustrating conversation, especially with these earlier generation batteries, where we said, all right, you're going to get backup, but it's kind of like partial home backup. You're going to move over just a few breakers because that's all the battery can really handle, and you're just going to have a few breakers backed up. And so it's not really a full home backup like everyone wanted. So this meter collar being the answer to just being able to back up your whole panel was amazing. I mean, it was perceived very well, but the problem with it is that there's no load management, and most people that are just installing one Powerwall 3 with the backup switch, unless they're home during the blackout and they can manually go around quickly and turn off heavy load breakers, like for example, HVAC machines, pool pumps, anything else that may use a lot of power, you're gonna drain your battery extremely quickly. Whereas with the Franklin, built in to the A gate, you have 3 smart circuits, which essentially gives you a span panel-like feature on 3 of your breakers where you can actually control 3 of your breakers right from your phone. And so if you have like a pool pump and you don't want your air conditioning or your EV charger to be on the main service panel, where if you have a blackout, it's just going to drain super fast, you could put those 3 on the smart circuits, for example, and now you can manually turn those off really fast if a blackout occurs, and you can conserve your battery. So a lot of people, they really want this load management, and the Powerwall 3 does not give that to you unless you install it with a span panel, which costs a small fortune. And if you're doing that, you're using the gateway, and it's gonna cost way more money. And at that point, you should just do the Franklin, because it's actually gonna end up being less expensive, surprisingly. So that's my opinion on that. This load management is definitely a cool feature that I think a lot of people, once they have it, they're going to realize the value. All right, when it comes to this meter collar, which I previously talked about a little bit, the Franklin aPower2 eventually is going to be able to be used with a meter collar, but we don't know exactly when it's really going to be available. Like, for example, Tesla said theirs was going to be available like a year before it actually became available, and Franklin, they're probably giving us their overly optimistic opinion, just like Tesla did. So they may say that this is going to be out at the end of the year, but who knows? I wouldn't necessarily wait for it, but it is good to know that eventually Franklin will have a meter collar, just like Tesla. So you can go either way, which will be really cool. And then I explained this a little bit before, but the Powerwall 3 is going to be DC coupled mainly. You can AC couple it, but it works better as a DC coupled battery, which means that ultimately the power coming down off the roof is still in a direct current DC. And that inverter inside the battery actually acts as the inverter for the solar and the battery, versus the AC coupling, which means that the power is already coming to the battery in AC form, which means that there is another inverter that is responsible for inverting the solar's DC to AC. Then it goes to the battery, and the inverter in the battery is only responsible for the battery's power, not the solar and the battery. So that's one of the main architecture differences between the two. It does make it so the AC coupling generally is a little bit more money, but there are benefits to it. And you also, if you're using the microinverters, get the no single point of failure. So it's going to be a more resilient and reliable system as well. And just in general, the reliability of the Franklin is actually far better, because in my real world experience already, I've installed about 50 Powerwall 3s, and about 5 or 6 of them have had problems. 2 of them have had to actually be replaced, and we're still in the process of working with Tesla to get them replaced. And so now that this product has actually been out for a while, we're starting to see somewhere in the range of 6% failure rates already, which isn't the end of the world. You know, it's not like the majority of these batteries are having problems, but there are a handful of projects that are quite frustrating to deal with post-install, as the Powerwall 3s have problems or need to be replaced. And I will say that the Franklin, statistically, Franklin claims that only 36 of 21,000 units deployed have failed, and I haven't had a single Franklin that has failed personally. I don't have 50 of them on houses yet, but maybe about half that. And they've been fantastic. Mostly the first generation, the aPower, not the aPower2. This one's brand new. All right, let's go over the generator compatibility. This is something that a lot of people ask about. And with the Franklin, you can have a generator. Like if you have a generator, you can actually use the generator's power to directly charge the batteries. And so maybe you can directly charge the batteries up within an hour or two and then run off the batteries again, which is, for a lot of people, if they're more off grid, it's a feature that they value more, because it's really important probably to have a third layer of redundancy, a third energy source, not just solar panels, batteries. It's good to have a generator as well. And with the Powerwall 3, you can have a generator with your house, but it only works what we call downstream, which means that you can't actually charge the batteries. If you had a blackout and you didn't have any battery power, you'd have to run the generator basically until the next day came and you were back onto solar power, like I said, versus the Franklin, where you could just have the generator run for maybe like an hour or 2 hours, quickly charge up the batteries, and then run off the batteries again. So if you don't want your generator to be running for hours and hours and hours, or you don't want to deal with the noise, or you don't want to have to worry about having so much fuel, like maybe you only want to have a little bit of fuel on hand, and all you'll need is enough fuel to run the generator for a couple hours to charge up your batteries, even if you need to, versus worrying about having maybe tons and tons of gallons ready to be able to run that generator for multiple hours. Especially if this isn't like a natural gas generator where you have a gas line, directly hooked up to the generator. Or maybe you have propane and you're worried about running out of propane and you want to conserve that. That's where the Franklin will really help. If you think you're going to be going back and forth from battery to generator, especially in winter time when your solar panels can't necessarily always keep up. That's an important feature to know. The operating temperature. Okay, so this is another place where I think the Franklin really shines, especially if you are going to be putting your battery either outside or you're in a desert environment where it gets really hot in the summer. You can see here that the Franklin, the operating temperature can go up to 131 degrees, whereas the Powerwall 3 can only go up to 122. Still, 122 is a lot, but especially if you're like in, the desert, like I get a lot of calls from people in like the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs area, and if you're in Arizona or just anywhere in the southwestern United States. I think that this Franklin having a much better heat sink and operating at 9 degrees higher is ultimately it's going to benefit a lot of these batteries in the summertime when they're really just barely hanging on in terms of keeping cool. So if you're in a very hot environment, another reason to definitely consider the Franklin. Both of these batteries use LFP lithium iron phosphate cells. They've both upgraded to the newest kind of cells at this point, which is really great. So they're more similar than different there. In terms of black start, all right, this is another thing that people ask me a lot about. What black start is the ability to have just solar panels turn your battery back on given the reserve amount is used up. So when you see that these batteries hold 15 or 13.5 kilowatt hours, really, this battery, like the Franklin, is, I believe they have 2 kilowatt hours of reserve. So really there's like 17 kilowatt hours, but you can't access the last two. And to my knowledge, the Tesla has 1.5 kilowatt hours. I may be slightly off on those figures, but they both have basically a little bit of reserve power that you can't officially access, and they don't quote. And so what I'm talking about here is, let's say you are in a winter season and it's going to be dark for multiple days in a row. Like it's just not sunny for multiple days in a row. Your battery is just not getting charged up. And let's say that your battery actually uses the little bit of reserve power that you have left. Now, in the event that the Powerwall 3 loses, you have to have an external generator be hooked up to it and manually charged up to turn back on. So this could be pretty awful if you're out of power and finally the sun after a few days comes back and now your battery is too dead to actually turn back on. So with the Franklin, they have a true black start, which means that with just the solar panels, you can actually get your battery back on given those 2 kilowatt hours of reserve power completely run out. So this is another feature which, especially for those that are more in like rural areas or just don't want to even think about worrying about having to call someone to have them come turn your Powerwall 3 back on and charge back up. Another reason why the Franklin, I think, is going to really shine in the real world. All right, I know we're really getting down here with this portrait board here that we did. Normally we do landscape. All right, so let's talk about how many units these companies have actually deployed. This is where Tesla just takes the cake completely, because fun fact, Tesla has actually deployed between the original Powerwall through the Powerwall 2, Powerwall Plus, etc. Now the Powerwall 3, they've actually deployed 750,000 units, and this is more units than every other company combined. So it's an undeniable fact that we have to give respect to Tesla for. Franklin, in the last few years that they've existed, they started in 2019. Their first product came in 2022. They spent a few years doing R&D, and in the last few years, they have 21,000 units deployed, which is still a lot more than most companies, but obviously versus 750,000, it's really not even close. Again, like I said earlier, Franklin claims that only 36 out of 21,000 units have had to be replaced or fixed through warranty. And I don't know exactly what this number is through Tesla, but I can promise you, and through my own experience, a lot more than 0.17%, which is what 36 over 21,000 I believe is, have needed to be replaced. And already we've had to replace a few Powerwall 3s just pretty much out of the box. They didn't work right. So something to keep in mind, this isn't everything, but you have to really give respect to Tesla in that regard. All right, let's talk about the service. So For this video, I wanted to put some clips together of going around and talking to the different contractors I worked with about how they felt about the customer service of Franklin versus Tesla. I just didn't have time to do it, but I thought it would be really funny to basically have me going around and just asking, like I said, my contractors, how do you feel about Tesla service? How do you feel about Franklin? What they'll tell you is that Franklin customer service is incredibly quick to actually get on the phone and help and fix things. With Tesla, everyone dreads their customer service. I don't think any contractor would tell you, oh my gosh, I love working with Tesla customer service. They're the most helpful, of all the brand. That's absolutely not the case. People are going to regularly say Franklin is amazing and easy to work with, and Tesla just makes you jump through hoops and make things hard for you. So that just seems to be the way it is. And you don't have to believe me there, but it is the truth. All right, and then where are these batteries actually manufactured? Now, I will say that currently, as of March 2025, Franklin is manufacturing in China, and their parts, even after they get their Bay Area factory completed, their assembly plant completed, most of the parts are gonna be coming from overseas. This is a global world we live in. If anyone says that everything is American made, that means that they're putting everything together, they're assembling. Manufactured is all coming from essentially overseas. Same thing with Powerwall 3 over here. Elon likes to make the statement of Powerwall 3 is putting Americans to work. And yes, we have the assembly plant in Nevada, but the actual LFP battery cells, for example, there's only 4 companies that actually manufacture LFP cells worldwide. So to my knowledge, everything is pretty much coming from overseas, and then both of these companies are going to be assembling them here in the US, but both of these companies are gearing towards being able to get that domestic content for that extra 10% tax credit, which kind of came into effect, but wasn't really able to actually be used until very recently. So, all right, anyways, I hope that through this video you found some value in it. I hope I helped you out. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly if you'd like help going solar. And once again, these are all the states I cover, almost 30 states. And I have consultants all around the country that are specialized in their local markets that can help you go solar. And we'd love to help you out. All right, thank you so much and talk to you soon.